Hi, this is Jason Culbertson with Open Design Docs. I'm here with Adrian Phillips. He's head of product design at Yahoo. Welcome, Adrian.
Hey Jason, how are you, mate?
And you're in New York, correct?
Yes, I am right now I'm at in the New York City Yahoo office in the only conference room that is soundproof. So it should be great for this.
Well, thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. And, you and I had the pleasure of working together a few years back at Airbnb, and I appreciate you taking the time to spend with me and sharing some of your information with the design community. I'd love to step back. So you've had a fascinating journey in your career. Um, you've been at Yahoo today. Prior to that, you were at Asana, Lyft, Airbnb. You've been at some pretty amazing companies that I think all of us are familiar with. I'd love to know a little bit about like your journey. Maybe let's just start at the beginning. Like what made you interested in design, and then how'd you end up in design leadership in the position you're in today?
Yeah, well, I definitely didn't have a traditional path. It's definitely got here in a very, very roundabout way. Uh, yeah, actually, if you can't tell from my accent, I grew up on the Gold Coast in Australia. And originally, I was actually going to do law and psychology. That's what I was going to university for. I never even thought about design. I never even thought about IT, or that's what we called it back there, or computer science or anything like that. Once I started, I was like, oh, I don't like this. So it immediately became law and information technology because, I like playing World of Warcraft. I'm like a computer nerd. Like, I love being on computers. So I was like, yeah, let's give this a shot too. Information technology is like computer science, basically the same thing. And yeah, a couple of weeks in, I was like, yeah, I don't like this law thing either. And so I just ended up focusing purely on IT. But one of the things that happened to me there while I was actually studying to be a software engineer was I always took kind of like creative courses. Back then, there was no Figma, no Sketch, it was Photoshop. So we did some Photoshop courses, graphic design. Flash was huge, did a lot of like interactive design, learned how to do ActionScript. And I think one of my most favorite things that like still with me that I loved from uni that was creative was like sound design. I really got into like this piece of software called Reason. It was just like so much fun to play with like all these like little virtual instruments and stuff like that. But anyway, so I graduated. I got a job at a mining company with this like awesome bunch of engineers who actually like taught me everything I needed to know about World of Warcraft. So I owe them that. They helped me grow in that way. But while I was doing that, I was actually able to get a gig in this group called the Ten Tenors because on the side I was doing musical theater and singing. I loved like creativity. I like performing. I like getting up and telling stories through music, introducing songs that I'm going to sing. So I was fortunate enough to shift from engineering into performing for 2 years and get to see like these incredible
What was it
parts of the
called?
world.
It was
The
called
Ten Tenors.
10, as in the number 10.
Technically, there was 11 because we had an understudy in case one of us got sick. But no, it
Was
was
this
it was
competitive with the four tenors?
it
But you
was.
had 10, so you were like, you one up them or you sixed up them?
I think what I always used to say was like, yeah, we had the three tenors with Pavarotti,
Three tenors
Domingo, and
up.
Carreras, but then Simon Cowell created Il Divo, which is four dudes, and then there was 10. But I think if you would ask the guy who created it, I think yeah, it came before Il Divo. They were there first, so I like to think of them as the original classical operatic boy band group. But anyway, I'll probably answer your question in a minute. So yeah,
No, this is great.
I did that for ages. 2 years, it was amazing. I got to travel with these amazing, talented people, both singers and musician and crew. You learn a lot about working with other people when you're on a bus, like and with each other, like 10, 50 weeks out of the year. So definitely grew a lot there. And then eventually I wanted to, move to the States, get off touring. And one of the things I needed to do to like work in the US is I needed to get a visa. So I went back to my engineering degree as a way to kind of get a job here. I worked with a company that did government applications and websites. And I started to feel like, oh, I was kind of not into like the coding piece of it anymore. I really liked actually going out and talking to clients and just really understanding what they wanted and what they needed from our company. So I eventually kind of started transitioning into project management, more kind of like account management, getting in front of people, being able to be like, cool, what do you need? What do your customers need? Tell me more. I eventually went to American Apparel where I did similar things. I did product management at an entertainment company. And I
Was
think
that
like,
in Los Angeles?
yeah, that was in LA.
Yeah.
It was a
That
spot
was
called
in the glory days of American Apparel, I imagine. when there was a lot of crazy things happening.
I have to say it was one of the most fascinating 10 months of my career. Let's just say that. It was quite the experience. I think the thing that was unreal about working there is that you were in the warehouse in downtown LA and you were basically doing technology, designing right next to the people that were making the clothes. So it was just kind of,
That's
I've never
right.
worked anywhere like that, and it was super awesome. And I happened to live in the arts district at the time, so it was a 6 minute walk to my apartment. So it was
That's
great.
great.
So yeah, I've like kept moving into this kind of kind of at Berman Braun, I was like doing, a lot of working with like UX guys, visual designers. I'm like, oh, I really like this. This is like a ton of fun. Kind of like coordinating the folks, being like, cool, we're doing a celebrity website, we're doing a mum's website. Great. What are we designing? What are we building? And I started thinking about like, okay, cool. I want to kind of go out and kind of do my own thing. And so I ended up with this amazing group of engineers called Slytrunk. They're still around. You should look them up. They're ex-Yahoo people actually as well too. Awesome bunch of guys. It was just me and I think it was like 10 or 11 engineers, and I kind of did everything but engineering. But one of the things that like really, I think this was like kind of the big moment that got me into design is like we were creating like little casual games and we were contracting out design. I started to play and be like, cool, actually, I can do this. Material design was coming out. iOS, Apple's human interface guidelines were there. So I had a lot to pull from and learn from when it came to like constructing things. And eventually we had a gig with the World Surf League and they needed an iOS and Android app. And like that was it. I was like, I wanna give this a go. Like let me design this. Let me take a stab at it. It's great because like I knew the engineers. I got to work like one on one with the iOS and Android engineers, but I also got to like be at the World Surf League working on an app in an entertainment space, a sporting place that I like absolutely loved surfing, and create this app experience that hadn't been done before. Like, competitive surfing back then was
Did you get some time with Kelly Slater back then?
I didn't. I did not. Who did I see wandering around the office? Pete Mel, famous big wave surfer. Saw him. Forget who else, but it was just like it was super cool because when you're testing something, you're basically like watching live surfing. So it gave me an excuse to like design and watch surfing on the
Yeah,
side.
that's I love that.
But I think there like that's when I just was like I was hooked on like the creative side of things, like working with people, figuring out like what we wanted to do, what we wanted to build, how do you represent scores for surfing, all that just got me super like into more of the design part of it as opposed to like the product management side of things. And then one thing I started doing just to kind of try and build my presence online and Slytrunk's reputation because we were a company that was like looking to grow the business. I just started throwing things out in different places like that was like the first time I put something on Dribble. And I don't know, like I wasn't actively looking, but Airbnb reached out and they said, do you want to be a product manager or a product designer? Because if you want to be a product manager, we've got nothing for you. But if you want to be a designer, we'd love to chat with you. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And then, yeah, at Airbnb, and as you remember, I was kind of like one guy on an island.
What team were you on?
First it was called Risk, and then it kind of it developed into this organization like called Trust, which included things like stopping credit card fraud on the platform, people's accounts getting taken over, how you recover them, eventually like identity, making sure the person who's on it matches the ID, all that sort of things. And that was awesome because I was one, I had you and your team to kind of go and chat to, hang out with. I had my manager, but this space just started blowing up, right? As technology, as apps and technology companies grow in popularity, bad people find ways to take advantage of them. So we started growing. I got one designer with me. I got another designer with me. I wasn't a manager yet, but I like loved bringing people together, doing crits, taking over like one of those like cubby holes and like, okay, cool. What are we designing? Like, let's go for it. And so that's what I think that was like the moment where I was like, oh, I love working through people. I love being, the guy that's like, oh, I need more folks. I need more great folks, going and finding them. Like that was like the real kind of big moment for me. I was like, oh, I really like this design leadership thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
That's
then,
super interesting. Yeah. I love the fact that you didn't set out to become a design leader. You just naturally progressed into that and found joy in it. And I find that the best design leaders are ones who I can't remember. There's a quote I think by Steve Jobs or something, but it's basically the concept that like the best leaders are people who are sort of forced to become leaders because they're the ones who are the best to sort of lead the team.
Yeah, because it's just I think for me it was that totally, but also like the other thing I think about is like I always find myself I just love working with a bunch of authentic people and like solving problems. And yeah, being on your own in a space under resource, like kind of pushes you to be like, okay, yeah, to your point, step up, be like, hey, advocate for more people, advocate, like, because we need it to solve these, like, our customers are getting hacked. Like, we got to get more people on this. And I just loved the storytelling aspect that came with that. And I think it kind of goes back to the performing piece. It's just, when you're trying to grow a team, get people excited, and I think this is what designers do really, really great, is we're able to tell a good story. And it's the same with performing, right? It's like you get up, you're like, this is my character, or this is the thing I'm about to share with you. And you have to like be into it. You have to love it. You have to be passionate about it, because if you don't be that way, people aren't excited about it. And I think, yeah, when you're talking about users, their problems, like that's like my favorite part of a presentation is like, look at this person, they're struggling. Cool. How do
I
we
think
fix
I
this?
remember presentations that you gave where, I do remember where you really connected people to the personal stories of people who suffered through like problems on the platform, which I think was really great and allowed you to get more resources.
Yeah. I think there's one presentation I remember. There's a video of it out somewhere. I think it was called Risky Business, because one of the things people didn't know was like, wait, what is this team? What are you trying to do? I remember putting together this keynote where we had like this couple, they went on a vacation to Europe, and it turned out that their Airbnb wasn't actually something that existed. And I think the funny thing that I remember about it is it was I think it was like 180 slides, because it was just full of just like these silly transitions. Because back then I was like prototyping in Keynote because it was fun, and I remember the
Well,
person saying
pre
like,
Figma as well, right? So,
yeah, yeah, it was. I mean, that was sketch days. Like we still hadn't jumped to Figma. I think I remember one person being, "Hey, there's this thing called Figma. You should check it out." Like around 2017. Okay, I'm gonna keep using Sketch.
I'm curious, you went on to Lyft, now you're on at Yahoo, you've continued to grow bigger and bigger teams. When you think back, it's interesting to me because I think I see people who have very clear career paths that they're on, and then other people like yourself, and frankly me as well, who didn't just, didn't follow a traditional career path. I'm very curious, like what is it that you've learned about that, and what would you say to those who are, unsure of what they want to do? They like design, they don't know what to do. I'm just kind of curious, like what you've learned along your career that you can share.
Yeah, I think for me the biggest moment was kind of going back to that right around like the World Surf League, like before Airbnb. I think it was just like looking for things that like really inspired me. Like, and I basically started by just copying great design. Like I started like looking and pulling. I mean, like, cool. How would I take that person's nav bar and put it over here? Okay, great. I need an icon for this. I'd go and look at like 100 icons for like a trophy. I go and look at icons for surfboards and be like, okay, cool. I trace them and I just start copying and then playing and then like putting my own spin on it. I think that was like the first big thing for me is like I didn't do any like specific courses in like product design, but I think I was coming up in a time where product design hadn't really quite taken shape yet either. So I got to learn from a lot of like amazing visual designers, amazing UX designers when those were like very, very separate disciplines at like media companies. And so I would say just practice and play is like my biggest thing. I just started playing with things, trying different things based on what others were doing out there. I think the other thing was like, start with a system. Like I know that sounds really obvious right now, but that's what got me going. And like the first apps I designed was just like, okay, what is Google saying? How do I build upon this? How do I learn from this? And that way you're not spinning too much and like getting stuck in a creative rut of trying to design your own button. Like you can start with something and then start tweaking with it, start playing with it. And then finally, I think the other big thing for me was just sharing. You got to try, I know it's tough for some folks, but you got to put yourself out there and get feedback on it. Like I was using Dribbble, I was using Twitter, I think at the time too. I was like throwing things up anywhere I could, just be like, hey, check out this logo. What do you think? And then people would like rip it apart, or they'd be like, this bit's great, this bit needs work. Most people are kind, right? I'm not saying they're like coming in, it's like super hot, but they had like very good feedback. And I feel like that taught me, and just like practice, keep doing, keep playing.
Did you go to art school at all?
No, that was the only, yeah, I only did the information technology degree, and then I basically took like the Photoshop course, the Flash course. I think I do remember like I nerded out on Flash like a ton, which is a shame because it doesn't exist anymore. It's a good thing. But yeah, like I really love like animating and playing with it. It's probably why I'm like so into like prototyping and like basically playing like with different animations. Like I did some fun stuff with Lyft. That was really cool. But yeah, like I think yeah, no art school.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating to me because you've obviously become very successful in your career. And I think that if I was early in my career as a designer or, trying to get into design, I would probably look at someone like you and just have this assumption based on the companies you've been at that you had this path that you set for yourself. And I could see that stressing me out trying to figure out, oh, how do I do that? But it sounds from your journey like this wasn't a predicted thing. This wasn't a planned thing. You sounds like you followed just where your interests led you, and then you've just inevitably like through that become, moved into these companies, moved into these roles.
Yeah, I think the other big thing I would say is like surround yourself with people that inspire you, right? Like I know it sounds easy, but no, it doesn't sound easy. Like you're like, cool, yeah, I just go anywhere and find someone that inspires me. But I think at each of these different places, even before Airbnb, I worked with some amazing product managers on the World Surf League side. I worked with some really great marketing people over there that taught me about brand colors and that sort of thing. And then at Airbnb, like it's just a mountain of incredible people that you
Yeah.
could just
I felt like working at Airbnb. I said this when I finally left the company that it was like getting a master's degree in design based on the people that we were surrounded by. It was incredible. Learned so much just through osmosis of the people we were around.
yeah, and it was just like going to reviews like were some of the best learnings I've ever done. And that's something that I also like encourage folks is like don't be afraid of reviews, especially like design reviews or forums or whatever you want to call them. It's like those are the places where you grow. Those are the places where you can get like amazing feedback. And like even before I was in those companies, like I said, you just put yourself out there. And yeah, sometimes they don't go great and you walk away feeling but trust me, like you get something out of it and you won't do that again, or you'll try something different next time. So yeah, for me it's like I think like yeah, if I was early in my career right now, it's just like yeah, how do I put myself in around people that are yeah, that can help me, that can give me feedback, that can help me grow, that can inspire me.
So you've worked at, large corporations like Yahoo and smaller companies. I mean, you were earlier on at Airbnb, at Asana. Those may be bigger, much bigger now. What are differences between the two that you see in terms of just how design functions within environments like that? The difference between smaller, even like early startup versus a large corporation.
Yeah, I mean I think in the smaller companies it's just like you just there's like virtually no process, right? You just go for it. You're like, cool, we need to do this. All right, great, let's go. Let's figure out how to get it done. I have a question. Cool, let's jump into a room together. You don't you don't have the like, wait, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to go to over here? Wait, who do I need to include in this meeting? No, it's you and 10 other people. Get into a room and figure it out. I think that's like the first massive difference between like startup and say, yeah, like a Airbnb, Lyft. I think it starts to get really interesting when you get to like Asana, which I think while I was there was like 1,000 to 1,500 folks, and then Airbnb was big when we were there, and then Yahoo was really big. And I think for me, like one of the biggest like differences or challenges is like how do you scale like those rituals and processes you put in for the whole design team versus where you let like the folks in the teams take control of things. Um, so like at Airbnb, we came into a pretty established team. I felt like there was like, okay, you do crits, you get a reviews. We all have that big team meeting. It was like, cool. We know where we're going. We know what we're doing. It felt pretty stable. And then at Asana, it was like, okay, it's 1,500 people. They had a really very established process, but it was because it was a good size as well too.
What's the difference in process between? I've actually never worked at a company even as big as 1,500. What's the difference in process between, let's talk about like design team size, let's say 50 or 100 people versus, I don't know how many people were at Asana on the design team, but I imagine larger than that. And how do those processes change? And then how does that then change again when you get to even a larger team like Yahoo?
Yeah. At Asana, I kind of equate it more back to the size of, yeah, Airbnb and Lyft. It's like the team wasn't like super big, but we were able to have a pretty clear cross-functional process. I think one of the great things about Asana was that it had a process that was very inclusive of not just design but other functions, and it was pretty stable, right? Folks knew at which point to like bring work to get feedback in order for a certain type of project to be successful. I think it really depends on the company too, because I would actually say that because Asana, you're a work management tool, we had a lot more tracking, we had a lot more like note taking, like we had a lot more. The process was, even though the size was about the same as Airbnb, the kind of product you're building led to the kind of process that was in place. And I thought that was super interesting between the two experiences. But then when you come to something like Yahoo, I think the biggest thing here is like, yeah, it's now I've got like four business units that span, a team of 100 plus. It's like how do you get those folks to come to the different rituals when they have their own rituals inside each of their different organizations? It's kind of like having four companies. So I think that's like the biggest challenge is it's almost like working within
How do you do that?
still figuring it out. Yeah. I think
I
I
mean,
think I think right now it's one of the things that I'm like really excited about is that the line of quality, the line of like the work, it happens in crits. I believe that, we sent out some, guidance to the team, to each of the different design leaders, and it's like, cool, here's crits. They're yours. This is where your designers give feedback. This is where they can bring their work in a safe space. And then we're like, okay, well, what are the other rituals that we can figure out or like try that help connect all the different teams? And right now we have this like central design review that we're trying out, and then we have an even higher like executive leadership review where it's like, okay, how do we actually create connection not only in the design teams but across the entire business as well? So for me, it's I think of it like a like like kind of like a triangle, right? It's like experiments and all this stuff that can happen in the team, but when you have something big and exciting that needs like different expertise, different kind of feedback, bring it up a level. And then when you have something that impacts the company, go all the way up, right? When you need everybody aligned. And I think those moments, those forums are like a great place to kind of use design to connect not only other designers, but like the business and product
and then are the designers who are working on that, are they the ones presenting up all those steps?
yeah, like I'm all about designers presenting. If you'd asked me like as a manager, what do you expect? And I was like, you got to let your people tell their stories, right? You can set them up, you can help them, you can ask where, for like somebody that's super junior, right? It's like, cool, what are you comfortable presenting? But it's like I love it when folks are kind of obviously driving their own work and at every level, because I think everyone has something to learn, especially like in those rooms.
I would imagine you've seen this as well, that when we were at Airbnb, they were starting to build a design system there. They built a team around it. It was a centralized team. Prior, there was no design system. Each team were kind of doing a little bit of their own thing. And then as the team grew, there was a necessity to create that consistency, and it also helps with speed. How does that work at a company the size of Yahoo? I would imagine something like a design system team or a design system is critical when you have a team that big.
Yeah, we are actively actually like working through that problem right now. It's like how do you create a system across all these different products, right? You've got mail, which is a mail Email, you're composing, you're writing. You've got search, you've got the homepage and all the different verticals and content areas underneath it. And then you've got like the core of the product, like the header, like the sign in, all those different account pages, payments, everything like that. So yeah, we
And
are.
my favorite Yahoo Sports
Oh
is
yeah,
where I do
Yahoo
all my fantasy leagues.
Sports. That's right. Yes, can't forget sports. But yeah, we're currently actually developing Yahoo OS because I mean that's what we're calling it. It's just a fancy name for a design system because like I think you're absolutely right. Right, is one of the biggest problems when you come into a company is like how do you get started? Like what do I reach for as a designer? And the same thing on the engineering side is like cool. What does my designer have that is like in sync with what we have in code? Like it's such a big velocity gain if you can do that right. And it's not an easy task. It's like you have to audit everything. And at a bigger company, there's more things to audit. You have to make sure everybody feels a part of it. Like that's one thing I'm huge on is I always love to bring people along. If it's product work, systems work, whatever it is you got to make sure you have the right people in the room, the right stakeholders are checking in. If my team is looking for feedback on a button, great. Who are we going to on the product side in order to get that feedback? Who are we going to on the engineering side? So as you get bigger and bigger, like the process to even get to that thing gets more complicated.
It feels like there's always this inevitable tension between speed and quality in design. Does that ever change? Because, I'm at a much smaller company. It's less than 200 people. The biggest challenge we have on the design team is speed versus quality design, and also how to do a design system while operating quickly in developing product. Does that ever change, or how do you see that differ as you go up in size?
Yeah, that's a awesome question. Yeah, it definitely becomes harder, right? At Asana, one thing we talked about was like quality or like making something incredible isn't just the responsibility of design. And when product engineering and design feel ownership over the thing that is shipped, then you'll find you'll get less of like I'm blocked by design and you'll get more of like oh, I'm making time for designers and people at the company to dog food this thing and test it out and do some like really intense QA. I think when everybody like this is one thing I always like kind of rant about is like quality is everyone's responsibility. It's a team sport, right? You have to as a PM you have to care about it. As a designer you have to care about it. As an engineer you have to care about it. And when you have that, the speed conversation becomes less of a thing um, than it used to.
Do you feel like there's ever a time at any of these company sizes where there wasn't a feeling that you had to ship faster and you had to design faster, you had to move faster?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think where it's like I think one of the big challenges that I still haven't quite figured out is like how do you help people understand how long design takes? And that doesn't go away anyway. And I think setting like having clear expectations, I think design ops can be really, really helpful. I think, having a tool like Asana where you can be like, this is gonna take 30 days and somebody can see it, and then if you need to push it out because of XYZ, it's transparent and people can follow along. Yeah, that problem never goes away. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it feels like at an earlier company, you're always trying to move as fast as possible because you think you need to get features out. But the reason why doesn't seem to change, or the reason why changes, but the need doesn't ever seem to change. There's always someone, there's always the desire to do more in the same amount of time, I would say. And that's where that speed versus quality challenge comes in.
Yeah, I think for me, one way I've tackled it was like, how do you actually create the space for designers to kind of forge ahead and like think like years out as opposed to just like focusing on execution. So one example that, that I think works well is if you have somebody on your team that has experience but is spending most of their time like banging out feature work constantly, it's like as a leader, how do I create the space for them to actually push further and like come up with an artifact, whether it be a prototype, a deck, or like a vision per se, so that they can take back and you can rebuild the roadmap, or you can like inspire them and be like, actually, let's do some of this. So creating the space for that is like I see that as kind of a resourcing thing, and so often on like teams or squads or pods, whatever you call them. Usually I start with like a awesome like generalist, somebody who can jack of all trades, do everything, visual interaction. But then I like go, okay, cool. When are these people going to need support? When are they going to need to mentor somebody? And that's what's awesome about like early career folks or folks straight out of school. Like they can actually help with the perception of like the speed thing, right? Execute on the immediate, like do some of the QA, learn as they do the gig, while the other designer can actually now has the space to kind of get ahead.
Yeah.
So that's
Love
one
that.
way of like really like it's like you just play with your resourcing a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. Let's switch gears for a second because I'm very curious also about culture. So, another key part of growing a team, managing a team is maintaining a strong culture on the team. What are strategies you use? Now you're overseeing like multiple teams, a lot of designers. How do you maintain culture at that size of a company versus a much smaller size organization?
Yeah, it's definitely been an experience to do it completely remotely. That's one thing that's been super different from say Yahoo. Asana was like in had like a hybrid. You came into the office, so it had the advantage of like having like in person. So I think the things we do now that have have worked is like what does the team need? Right. Obviously, everything we design, everything we create from a ritual perspective, I'm always like, okay, is this working? Is the content resonating? And like one of the big things we do is we call it Design Fridays, or it's like a design all hands where every 2 weeks we get together and it's like a very organized agenda. Like we have presenters, we have people come in, share work. The last one we did at the end of the year, everybody just kind of shared everything. Like each designer had one slide for the thing they were most excited about, and either from this year or looking forward. And that was like it was awesome to see just all the amazing work that everyone was doing. But like that moment of connection where some designers were like, "Wait, who is that?" It's like, wait. One of the other amazing things from like that ritual that day was uh, we had people like somebody on the team shouting out like, "Hey, I'm really good at running design sprints. If anyone wants to do it," because he showed like the thing he was most excited about was like a sprint, and I was like, "That's awesome. Did people know that?" So how do we create like moments like that? How do we create more ways for people to learn about each other, learn from each other, and get connected? We have one of the other big things we set up was like a design mentorship program where we pair folks up based on like what they want to learn. So like if really want to learn about prototyping, we'll pair them up with somebody that's more of a design technologist. If somebody wants to learn about leadership, like they can pair up with a director. It's such a awesome program to kind of create that connection remotely. Um, and then I think one of the big things that I think just can't be undervalued is finding that in-person time. Like Airbnb was incredible because we're all in the same crazy, amazing office, able to pull people into a room every day. Asana, we had, again, folks were coming in. But when it comes to a company that's fully remote, you've got to like plan to like bring folks together. Like, what are we doing? What are we going to talk about this time? Where do we want to go that's inspiring and creative? Like, that's been something we've found to be super effective too.
Digging into the remote, so Yahoo is completely remote.
Yeah, I come into the office because I live in a house with no walls, so there's no place for a desk, which is why I'm here. But yeah, Yahoo's you don't. There are offices, but yeah, you don't have to come in.
What do you think about, something I've thought a lot about? We're later in our career, being remote, we're just in meetings all day. What do you think about, let's say someone's early in their career, junior designer? How does someone like that, you talked about how at Airbnb, you and I both got all this learning by being around others, seeing what was on their computer screen, walking around and seeing the work. How do you replicate that, or can you, in a remote first environment?
Yeah, I think straight up honesty, like I think that's something I'm still thinking about. It's funny. I always think back to Slide Trunk because we were all 100% remote. There's some folks in San Jose, others in Southern Cal. I was in LA at the time. And we had this like software where it was I forget what it was called, but it was like a virtual office, and you had little avatars in each of the offices, and if your door was open, somebody could just come in and start talking to you. I think I think that was the thing that I really missed about being in person at like Airbnb, at Lyft, and Asana. Was it was just very easy to like grab somebody and be like, cool, hey, can you look at this can you talk about this? And I think ways to do that when you're remote is I actually think Slack, the huddles are actually a really good feature to just grab somebody. But I think you need to set expectations about when it's cool to do that. Because like the one thing I wouldn't want is like, yeah, just go talk to somebody, just jump into a huddle with them, and like people are getting, they like might be in deep focus and like designing something, and then all of a sudden, wait, this person wants to talk about it.
I mean, we had that challenge in person too, let's be honest, because you're sitting in a non-walled office, and the way people dealt with that was we literally people put headphones on.
Yeah,
That was the signal, don't bother me.
yep. So yeah, I got one team that does this thing with like a red flag, like don't bother me, and like they have set hours. So I'd say, if I was new to a company, fully remote, early in my career, I think, geez, yeah, it's tough. I'm not gonna lie. I would hope there are some like
And
guidelines.
I assume you're hiring people who are early in their career. How do you integrate someone like that into a company? What are the rituals that exist for them to try to replicate that? Because you're trying to help them grow in their career.
Yeah, well, I definitely think the mentorship thing I mentioned is like something that I encourage all the leaders to like, because that gets you like a one-on-one with weekly or however you want to do it with somebody like on the team. I think crits again are like are the thing where they can actually grow, get feedback, and really learn, and ensuring that all the leaders on the team are running them in a safe and healthy way. I think one of the things I've been thinking about setting up is just lunches. Like this is actually something I just randomly had an idea about with someone the other day was can we bring in like folks in similar areas? Can we
Yeah.
actually set up a time that's lightweight, that doesn't require like tons of budget and like have that like in-person connection? We have tried I think things we've tried of like, more like casual like remote meetings where you have like fun questions or like games and things like that. I think some people respond really well to that, some people don't. So I think it's really also like I think for me like the learning in this experience it's definitely like you need to create something that not only works for those folks looking for more connection and those folks that are actually like also looking for just like heads down time, just want to work, have like and like have very specific intentional moments when they like mentor or coach or like support others.
It feels like it would be even more difficult for someone who's more introverted
Yeah.
than extroverted. I mean, part of the desire is to hire a variety of people on your team and not have everybody be the same. But I could imagine, and so you want to hire people who are both extroverted and introverted, but introverted, remote, fully remote, that feels very hard early on in your career.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why I think I was going with like you have to have something for everybody, right? Is you can't just take somebody and be like, "Hey, I'm going to throw you into this 100-person meeting and you're going to share something." They may not be ready for that. They may want something a little more intimate, a little more like less daunting. And so like how do you create like those rituals, those moments? And I think again, it's like that's why I think like something like the lunches are a cool idea because it's like low pressure, right? You just come, you meet people, you're not even sharing work, you get to know them, or even just like creating time where folks can connect on Zoom and just like have casual conversations. If there's an appetite for that and that's what folks are looking for, then that's something we'll try.
I think something when I look back at all the places I've worked at, and you're reminding me of right now, is that no matter how high you go up in terms of leadership at a company, you don't really know what's going to work and what's not going to work. You just try stuff, and there is no formula. And inevitably, it always changes as well, depending on like as the company grows, what worked at a certain number of people doesn't work at the next, you know, X number of people.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, like we've tried stuff that hasn't worked and we've gotten feedback from people like this isn't great, could we try something else? Or hey, we really want to do this but we need more information. Like nothing is ever perfect, right? And I think that's something that I've learned from everywhere. It's like you try it, the sooner you try it, the quicker you can change it, tweak it, make it better, or get rid of it. And so I'm always looking for like, okay, cool. How can I help this team? How can I support this team? Because yeah, you're right. The company's changing, the priorities change. And yeah, something that made sense 6 months ago may not make sense now.
I mean, it's very similar to working on products in general. It's like the org is the product.
Yeah. No, that's kind of going back to what I was saying earlier. It's like being a leader, at some point you stop when you get to a certain level, you stop solving product and user problems, but you solve user problems for the organization and the people. Like
How do you like that transition for yourself personally?
I love it. It's for me like I love just like helping people do their best work. Is that review working? Great. Is it not working? Cool. Okay. How could we make it better? Like how could we support you more? Like I love things that help people do incredible work and focus on design. Like you mentioned, like, yeah, as leaders, we're in meetings all day. For me, I'm like, cool, how can I create a team where designers have tons of time, heads down time, and can focus and can like really have time for the craft and to be amazing designers? Like that to me is designing teams and rituals around that is so much fun for me. I do miss working on user problems every now and then, and sometimes I might, but I get that through reviews. I get that through people coming to me and being like, "Hey, can you check this out? I'd love your feedback on it." Like I still love doing that. And I always tell people, like anyone who joins, I always have a one-on-one with them. And I said, "Hey, listen, like I'm trying not to be a big scary leader or anything like that, but if you want to just jam in Figma, if you want to like share something, like I'm always happy to dive in and play." And like I think that's like seeing the team do that and like being able to do that with a team, I think is so much fun.
That's awesome. Switching gears for a minute, I'm thinking about just the trends of tools, AI, etc. What do you think are going to be the biggest changes in how people work, how design works over the next, I'm not even going to go 10 years, let's say just the next 3 to 5 years. I feel like it's changing so fast. What are you thinking about as a design leader in terms of how you're going to have your team evolve with the way that all of these tools are evolving?
Yeah. I think there's a few things for me. I think AI and like technology evolving can just make stuff easier. Like things that are repetitive, that are just like I don't feel like doing that, or I need to hand this off to this person in order to do that. That stuff's going to get easier. That stuff's going to get like maybe I don't even have to do it. Like I think about like Figma's prototyping, where wouldn't it be great if you just push a button and it all hooks everything up for you. Like it just figures it out. Like you dragging the dot from the button to this screen, you don't need to be doing that. And I think those kinds of things, those repetitive tasks, I think that'll really help like allow us as designers to focus on being creative, solving the problems, and like really pushing things. Like if you can just get that boring stuff out of the way, awesome. The other thing I think where we could really like what I'd really love to see and what I'm like kind of pushing for is like how do we get like real feeling designs in people's hands earlier? Like how do we get prototyping being more upfront in the process, right? Like I have design engineers on my team, and one of the big things that I'm like excited about is like really embedding them in the work to like show that hey, if you take something that's like actually feels real into reviews, you'll get a different kind of feedback. You'll get better feedback. And so I think tools and technology will help make that easier. You won't need to know how to code is because I think there's like a leap, right? Where it's like, oh, I have to learn this new tool like origami or framer in order to do XYZ. And I'll stay here because I don't have the time or I'm comfortable where I'm at. And I think changes in technology will make those things easier for folks that want to break into that.
Do you see that today where folks on your team are starting to use tools like V0 or Cursor or whatever it may be and just creating working prototypes?
Not yet. I think we had a push for folks to use origami as a way to do native prototyping. There's like a ton of like that can produce something even more like real than say Figma can. But I've got some pretty cool, pretty impressive folks that can do a lot with Figma, and I love that they're doing that as early as possible. Um, but yeah, no one diving into any of those new things. Somebody just shared Lottie Lab as something that seems super cool, something to try too. But yeah, not yet. But that's kind of like one of the problems I want to solve or like help figure out is, yeah, what are the right things in order for us to tell our story with our designs? And like, I think that's going back to it. It's just like, if this tool can help me convince people that like this is the right thing, as opposed to like what I did before, then I was like, cool. How do we find that thing? How do we make it easy for folks to get into it, and how do we get it early on in the process? Because what I don't want to see have happen is like it just happens at the end. It's too late at that point. Like if you've got these amazing screens, and then all of a sudden like, oh wait, this doesn't feel or look or work the way as intended.
Starting to see some designers start with these tools and not even going into Figma initially, using tools like V0 from Vercel and creating early ideation, which I think is fascinating because I feel as if that's where we're going toward is I can just start building the thing instead of, and then I can add the pixels later versus the other way around.
Yeah, I'm all for people bringing their own process. Like I've got some designers that are incredible in the early stage conceptual, and then I've got folks that can bang out 5 different explorations in high fidelity like that. And so it's like I would love a mix. That to me sounds super cool. Is right. You have a mix of people that are doing different things, and I think at a startup you could probably do that like really, really well. It's like okay, this guy's great at this. This person over here is incredible at like this part of it, and you're all like learning from each other. Like that feels like the dream for me.
Yeah. Last question for you before we wrap up here. For someone who's earlier on in their career aspiring to become a leader, what's one piece of advice that you would offer to them?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that I always tell people is like you don't have to be a manager to be a design leader. I went that way because it just felt like I love talking to people. Like you mentioned like solving company problems. I also like listening to people and figuring out okay, how can I support you in your career or your life? Like that to me is like okay, that's the manager piece. But the leadership piece is like you can be a leader without having people report into you. You can be inspiring just purely based on like your level of your craft. To your point, if you got somebody on your team using Vercel, doing prototyping and conceptual design early on and getting feedback right away and nailing it, like that person's a leader. That person can step up and be like, hey, here's my process, here's what I do. Let me give it back to you. That's what I'd tell folks is just like don't get caught up in titles, don't get caught up in company hierarchy. Just figure out like what you want to teach, what you want to inspire others with, and what like gives you the most passion. Because naturally you'll just become amazing at it and people will look to you and boom, you're a leader.
I love that. Thanks, Adrian. I really appreciate your time. It's
Yeah,
been
no.
an awesome conversation.
Yeah, right. This was fun. Do it again.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, take care. Thanks again.
You too, mate. Thanks for having me.